Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Shakespeare's Hamlet. This is a play that comes during the Renaissance in England from 1603 of the Common Era. And Shakespeare lived 1564 to 1616. As we're talking about this, I want you to think about how it compares to Lope de Vega's Fuente Abejuna. The structures are very different. This play has 5 acts. Lope's plays tend to have 3 acts. This is a tragedy. It is going to end badly, and that's what tragedy means. As we talked about with Oedipus and the Greeks. It's also a play, though, that is about a type of justice, except for, since it's a tragedy, it will end sadly, and there's not going to be a lot of justice. Now, one thing I want to make clear, because in this video we're going to talk about the first act, which consists of 5 different scenes. You know, imagine, there are many scenes because it's going to be a 5-act play. This first act is to let the audience know what's going on. So there is a lot of exposition. Exposition means background information. But of course, in order to give the crowd something that is spectacular, Shakespeare is going to give us a ghost. And the ghost is of Hamlet's father, whose name also is Hamlet. And it's important to know we have Hamlet, the king, who has died, and Hamlet, the son, who is going to inherit the throne eventually. But both of their names are Hamlet, and that can get confusing at times. So, right off the bat, we have it's all set in Denmark, and we have a scene where guards are out at night. And Bernardo says, "Who's there?" And Francisco says, "Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself." And Bernardo says, "Long live the king." Bernardo? He. "You come most carefully upon your hour." He showed up to work on time to take over guarding the castle. "'Tis now struck 12, so we're starting in the witching hour at midnight, right? Get thee to bed, Francisco." And Francisco says, "For this relief much thanks. 'Tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart." "Well, have you had a quiet guard?" "Not a mouse stirring." "Well, good night. If you meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch," meaning my co-workers, "bid them make haste. Tell them to hurry up because they're running late." "I think I hear them. Stand ho, who's there?" And Horatio and Marcellus enter the stage. And this takes place in a theater called the Globe. Shakespeare named it the Globe. And by this, he's naming the whole theater after the world, the earth, because everything can take place in it. And it was built in such a way that you had some covered seats. The higher seats were for rich people, but for a penny, poor people could get in, and they were called the groundlings because there were no chairs for them. They could just set up wherever they wanted to watch the play. Now, in a way, it's a coliseum because most of it is not covered at top, and so that's the heavens. And then Shakespeare had it built with a trap door, and he called that trap door, and the space underneath it that actors could drop through, the hell. So we've got heaven, the earth, and hell. And Horatio says, "Friends to this ground, and liegemen to the Dane." So they're loyal to the king. And Francisco says, "Give you good night." "Oh, farewell, honest soldier." "Who's relieved you?" "Well, Bernardo has." "Give you good night," and he goes off. "Hola, Bernardo," Marcelo says. "Say, what? Is Horatio there?" "Well, a piece of him." "Well, welcome, Horatio. Welcome, good Marcellus. What has this thing appeared again tonight. So, right off the bat, we have a little bit of a mystery going on. And this thing that's being referred to is the ghost of the dead king, Hamlet's father. And Bernardo says, because it's just a little bit after midnight, I've seen nothing. Marcelo says, Horatio says it's but our fantasy. So we're just making this up. We're imagining what we see. And will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight twice seen by us. Therefore I've entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if again this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and speak to it. Because, why? Seeing is believing. And Horatio says, tush, tush, it will not appear. Bernardo says, and let us once again assail your ears that so fortified against our story, that argued, that said we were lying, what we have 2 nights seen. And Horatio says, well, sit down and let us hear Bernardo speak of this. Bernardo talks. Last night of all, when yon same star that's westward from the pole, so the North Pole, had made his course to illumine that part of the heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating gone, so the bell tolling the time for people, 12 times for 12 o'clock at night, and right as he says that, the ghost enters on stage. And Marcellus says, peace. Break thee off, look, where it comes again. Bernardo, in the same figure like the king that's dead. Thou art a scholar, speak to it, Horatio. And Bernardo asks Horatio, looks it not like the king? Mark it, look at it closely, Horatio. Oh, and Horatio says, most like it. It harrows me with fear and wonder. It would be spoke to. He says, and now I've interrupted this lecture with my phone going off. I apologize. Give me 1 second while I make sure the sound is turned off. All right. We got that taken care of. My phone is like the ghost, apparently. And Marcel says, question it, Horatio. Kind of like, 3 dudes daring another one. Why don't you go talk to it? What art thou that usurpest at this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak! And this is a phrase that's going to get used throughout this act. Speak, speak. And the ghost is not going to speak to them, because the ghost of King Hamlet wants to speak to the living Prince Hamlet. And Marcellus asks, is it offended? See, it stalks away, Bernardo says. Stay, speak, speak, I charge thee, speak. Horatio yells at the ghost, as the ghost leaves, because he has not found his son. 'Tis gone and will not answer. How now, Horatio, you tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? Because we didn't make this up. What think you on it? Before my God, I might not this believe without the sensible and true avouch of my own eyes. Now that I've seen it, I believe you're right. You have seen this ghost twice, and this is the 3rd time, right? Horatio says, Marcel says, is it not like the king? As thou art to thyself, meaning yes. Such was his very armor he had on when the ambitious Norway combated. So frowned he once when in an angry parley he smote the sledded Polacks in the eyes. It is strange. Well, twice before, says Marcellus, and jump or just at this dead hour, with martial stock has he gone by our watch. In what particularly thought to work I know not, but in the gross and scope of my opinion, this bodes some strange eruption in our state. And Marcella says, so there's something strange going on in Denmark, right? Marcella, and why would Shakespeare set this in Denmark? Well, this is a story that comes from Denmark, but whenever you're going to write about royalty having conflicts within the family, and you're living under royalty, Queen Elizabeth, not the one who's alive right now and whose husband just died, but the first Queen Elizabeth, you don't want to criticize the living government of your country. So set it somewhere else so that you can get into the nitty-gritty. And Marcellus tells Horatio, good now, sit down and tell me, he that knows why the same strict and most observant watch so nightly toils the subject of the land. Why does this ghost keep coming back after midnight? And why such daily cast of brazen cannon and foreign mart for implements of war, meaning all of his armor? Why such impress of shipwrights, whose sore task does not divide the Sunday from the week? What might be toward that this sweaty haste does make the night joint laborer with the day? Who is it that can tell me what's going on, that can inform me? And Horatio gives us a lot of exposition, a lot of background. And he says, that can I. At least the whisper goes on. Our last king, meaning King Hamlet, whose image even now appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, and dared to combat, in which our valiant King Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, did slay Fortinbras. And then he goes on to talk about how, because there was this war, Norway against Denmark, that Denmark acquired much more land. And now the heir to the throne of the king who was killed wants the land back. And Horatio in line about 114 says, or 112 says, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. Meaning, so our mind's eye, our imagination, it's like having dust in your regular eye. All of this. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the graves stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streak. So when Julius Caesar fell, people came out of their graves as ghosts. As stars with trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun, and the moist star, meaning Luna, meaning the moon, upon whose influence Neptune's empire stands. The sea relies upon the moon for its motion, was sick almost to doomsday with eclipse, and even the like precursor of fierce events as harbingers proceeding still the fates, and prologue to the omen coming on, have heaven and earth together demonstrated unto our climatures and countrymen. So he's going on and on and on, and the ghost comes back. Why does Horatio go on and on? Because he's the educated student. And so he's one of those know-it-alls. And you've all met him. Whether they're students or not, they know everything, right? The ghost enters. But stop, behold, lo, where it comes again. I'll cross it, though, even though it blasts me. And then he yells at the ghost, quiet, my puppy, quiet. Stay, illusion. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that may be to thee to do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, oh, speak. Or if thou hast uphoarded in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, if you've laid up treasure like a dragon, speak of it. Stay and speak. And then a rooster crows. And this is a theatrical tradition where we've just had from midnight until about, well, people will say 6 o'clock. I have roosters. They crow all night. However, Western tradition says they crow just before sunrise or as the sun rises. So all of a sudden, that whole 6 hours of time has passed. And and then Marcel says, "Shall I strike at it with my partisan? Should I run at the ghost with my sword? Do, if it will not stand. Well, 'tis here, 'tis here." And of course, the ghost is not there to duel with them. The ghost must have some sort of message. And the ghost leaves. Why? Because it's getting to be night. And we will find out that the ghost can only come out at night because the rest of the time, King Hamlet's spirit, okay, so in English, the Holy Ghost being part of God, or a reflection of God, ghost can mean a spirit, a soul. And King Hamlet's soul has to go to purgatory, except for at night, when it can escape purgatory. And in purgatory, it's being burned and refined. Why? Because he died without being able to repent. And then Horatio says to his two friends, over in line 170, "Let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet, for upon my life the spirit, dumb to us," meaning it won't speak to us, "will speak to him. Do you consent? Do you agree we shall acquaint him with it, as needful in our loves, fitting our duty?" "Let's do it," Marcellus says, "I pray, and I this morning know where we shall find him most conveniently." And so they want to go and let Prince Hamlet know, by the way, your dad's spirit, your dad's ghost, has been coming out now 3 nights in a row. Now we go to scene 2. And we're going to hear from the new king, who happens to be the dead king's brother. And we're going to hear the new king criticize Hamlet for grieving his dead father too much. And the new king, who is his uncle, and who calls him cousin, now wants to say, "You don't need to grieve your dead father because now you're my son." I don't know how you'd feel about that if your parent died and one of your relatives came up and told you, "Stop feeling sad about that because I'm your new parent." But for me, all it would do is piss me off. Now both of my parents are dead, and I still miss them, and they've been dead a long time. They had good long lives, which is nice. Both of them died of dementia. But if someone started coming into my life and started calling me son, I would not like that. I would not like that. So here we have the king, the new king, and the original queen, Hamlet's mother, entering the stage. And it turns out that, how shall I say, once King Hamlet died, they had the funeral for him and immediately got married. Methinks something might be wrong there. And I don't know if you have ever had a spouse die, but when my wife died, I didn't immediately get remarried. It was the last thing from my mind. But for this queen, well, you wait a month, maybe 2 months. Why not get remarried? Which implicates her in the king's death, her first husband's death. And so the king walks in and says, in line 1 of scene 2, "Though yet of Hamlet," meaning King Hamlet, "our dear brother's death, the memory be green," even though it's been very short. And that it us, meaning he talks in the royal we, he refers to himself as we and us. Which is very arrogant, right? But that's what kings and queens have done throughout Western history. showing that they are more than their subjects, and that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief and our whole kingdom to be contracted in a brow of woe. Yet so far has discretion fought with nature that we, meaning himself, with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves. Oh, I grieve my brother, but since I did wise grief, I think more of myself. Therefore, our sometime sister, and now our queen, can you imagine calling someone your sister and then sleeping with her and marrying her? I think that's kind of a problem. So there's this theme of incest that goes throughout this play. The imperial jointless to this warlike state have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth in funeral, and with dirge in marriage. So laughing at a funeral and then mourning in a marriage, in equal skill weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Nor have we herein borrowed your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. For all our thanks now follows that you know, and then he's going to go on and talk about the political thing. Okay, but he just called his sister-in-law's wife, who we just call sister. He just said, oh, I grieved my brother deeply when he died. But on the other hand, his wife was available. Okay, so he's going to send messengers because of this land that the young Fortinbras wants back from Denmark, Fortinbras from Norway. And he's going to send a message to the uncle of this young man to tell him to stop. So the messengers leave. And if you go to line 41, he looks at Laertes, who has a question for him. And Laertes is the son of Polonius, who is a court counselor, a counselor to the king. And Laertes is going to ask permission to leave the kingdom because he came for the funeral, he's seen the wedding, and now he wants to get back to France, where he's doing his studies. And in line 15, Laertes says to the king, my dread lord, your leave and favor to return to France, from whence, though I willingly came to Denmark to show my duty in your coronation. Okay, so he came for the coronation. Yet now I must confess that duty done, my thoughts and wishes bend again toward France, and bow them to your gracious leave and pardon. Could I have permission to leave now? And the king says, well, what does your father say? Have you your father's leave? What says Polonius, who happens to be right there? And Polonius says, he does have my lead. He hath my leave, my lord. Wrung from me my slow leave by laboursome petition at last. Upon his will I sealed my heart consent. Please let him go. And so the king says to Laertes, the new king, take thy fair hour, Laertes, time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will. And then he looks at Prince Hamlet. And now my cousin Hamlet and my son. It reminds me of this sick joke that happened to my kids when they were in elementary school back in Utah, my son, where they taught these little children who were in 3rd grade, maybe it was 2nd grade, probably 2nd grade, to sing a song called I Am My Own Grandpa, and all the adults laughed. It's a song about incest, okay? So he calls him his cousin, and my son. And Hamlet says aside, meaning that the actors on the stage, they continue to interact with each other, / pretend not to hear the one actor who is speaking to the audience. And Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. He is angry. He's not just related to him as a son, as a cousin. How can he call him his father? And he's saying that the king is less than kind. And the king rebukes him for his grieving, because it hasn't been that long. How is it that the clouds still hang on you? Not so, my lord, I am too much in the sun. So Hamlet is punning. I'm in the sunshine too much. There are no clouds on me. But he's also saying, I am too much in the sun. You're calling me your son, and I was my own father's son. I am too much in the sun. And his mom says, the queen, good Hamlet, cast off thy nighted color, and let thine eyes look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest it's common. All that lives must die. Okay. Get over it. Get over it. That's really not the right thing to say to somebody who is grieving. Well, you know how it is. Everything dies. That doesn't make it so it doesn't hurt. And it certainly doesn't help to have people say such unhelpful, it doesn't help to have people saying such unreasonable and unempathetic things. I'll give you an example. Maybe a couple. My twin sister had twins. She had a bunch of kids. And then at the end, she had twins, Jeremiah and Zechariah. And when Jeremiah and Zechariah were 3 years old, Jeremiah got killed while playing with his brother. And at the funeral, my twin sister had people come up and say, wouldn't you rather he was dead than that he was rebellious? Or another one said, well, isn't it great that God gave you two because he knew he would take one back? Do you think that made my twin sister happy over having her 3-year-old killed? I still grieve Jeremiah. He used to leave me messages. Back when we had message machines, so tape machines, and I'd get home from working, and I would have a message, and I would hit play, and I would hear, hello, Warren! Warren! Pick up the phone, Warren! Call me back. All right, and sadly for me, because my message machine would get full and then I'd erase all the messages to reuse the tape, the last message, and he left me many, many messages when he was 2 and when he was 3 years old, because he knew where the speed dial was. And I erased his last message. I wish I had it to this day. And it wouldn't help anybody to tell me, well, you know, everything dies. Yeah, but not helpful. And Hamlet agrees with his mom because he's being respectful. Aye, madam, it is common. Well, if it be common, why seems it so particular with thee? Because she's a newlywed now. That's how much grief she has for her husband. It seems, madam, nay it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, meaning he's wearing black, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forth breath, meaning sighing, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, meaning crying, nor the dejected behavior of the visage, meaning frowning, together with all forms, moods, and shapes of grief. Hamlet is grieving, okay, that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, those outward signs seen. For their actions, what a man might play. And here is Shakespeare, right off the bat, injecting, reminding the audience, we're in a theater. And back at this time, people called actors players. It wasn't a playa like today, but they were players. And anybody can pretend grief, is what Hamlet's saying, by showing certain signs on the outside. But I have that within which passes show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. I'm dressed as though I'm grieving, but I'm telling you, even this is not, it's not pretend, and it does not cut to the heart of how I feel. And the king says to him, "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father. But you must know your father lost a father, and that father lost his, and the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. But to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness." Okay, try arguing somebody out of his or her grief. Call them stubborn, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled. For what we know must be as is common sense, as any the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we, in our peevish opposition, take it to heart? Fie! 'Tis a fault to heaven. He's telling him, Hamlet, you're sinning against heaven by grieving your father. It's a fault against the dead, a fault against your father, a fault to nature, to reason, most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers. You know what? Dads die. Shit happens. Now go be happy. And this must be so. We pray you, meaning I, throw to earth this unprevailing woe and think of us as of a father. You know, I know your mom just divorced daddy, and I just moved in 2 days ago, but now I'm your real daddy. For let the world take note, you are the most immediate to our throne, reminding Hamlet that he is heir to the throne, and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. For your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire. And we beseech you, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our chiefest courtesan, a cousin, and our son. You're my son, you're my cousin. Ew! Ooh, don't go back to school. Just stay here. Why would this new king want him to stay around? Because he wants to keep his eye on Hamlet. Why would he want to keep his eye on him? If he were a good person, it would be because Hamlet is grieving. But that is not why. We'll find out why from the ghost later on in this act, from Hamlet's father. And then his mom begs him to stay, and he says, okay, I'll do it. And then Hamlet is left alone on stage, and we have his first soliloquy. And if you have never heard the word soliloquy, you've heard the word eloquence and solo. Solo means alone. Eloquence means well-spoken. It's something that is spoken alone. And so all the other actors are off stage, and it's only Hamlet. And soliloquies are a technique, a convention in Shakespearean theater, so that the audience understands what the actor is thinking. And this is what he is thinking. He is suicidal and depressed. He says, oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into dew. I wish my body would just melt, and then it would evaporate. or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. I wish it wasn't a sin to self-slaughter, to commit suicide. Oh God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. This is deep depression. This is deep grief. Fie on it, fie, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. He's seeing the whole world as just full of weeds. Things rank, stinky, and gross in nature possess it merely that it should come to this. But 2 months dead. It's only been 2 months since his father died. Nay, not so much, not even 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr. Okay, and he's going to talk about his father is a better man than his uncle / new father. He was so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth. He loved my mom so much that if the wind was blowing, he would try to make sure that she was protected from the wind. Must I remember why she would even hang on him? So she act all lovey-dovey, as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on. And yet, just 1 month after my dad's death, within a month, let me not think on it. And this is one of the most famous lines of this play, and this play has many, many famous lines. If you want to check out a musical snippet from this play, you can check out the episode of Gilligan's Island when they do Hamlet on Gilligan's Island. It was a retro thing. Very, very funny. But he says this line, "Frailty, thy name is woman." He is unhappy with his mother, calling her weak. A little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, she was all tears. Why, even she, oh God, a beast that lacks discourse, that wants discourse, a beast, even a beast that can't speak of reason, would have mourned longer. Married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I'm the father of Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left a flushing in her galled eyes, she married, O most wicked speed, to post with such dexterity 2 incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. All right. This is not a young man who is happy. He's not happy with his uncle, and he's not happy with his mother, and he's not happy that his father has died. And so Horatio comes in, and we know that Horatio wants to let Hamlet know, by the way, we're seeing your father's ghost. Okay? And Horatio says, "Hell, your lordship," and Hamlet says, "I'm glad to see you well." Horatio? Is it Horatio? Or do I forget myself? "It's the same, my lord, and your poor servant ever." "Sir, my good friend, I will change that name with you. I would rather be you than me." And so what's going on? And Marcellus is there, and Hamlet says he's good to see him, and then he says he's glad to see him, and also Bernardo, and then Hamlet makes a joke with Horatio and says in line 175, "We'll teach you to drink deep ere you depart." Let's go out and party. before you leave the kingdom. And Horatio says, my lord, I came to see your father's funeral. And Hamlet says, I pray thee don't mock me, fellow student. I think it was to see my mother's wedding. Do you hear that? Bitterness? So a friend of his says, I came for your father's funeral. Come on, man. You know it was to see my mother's wedding. Indeed, my lord, it followed hard upon. And Hamlet says, thrift, thrift, Horatio. The funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage table. You know, we're being thrifty. We took the leftover food from the funeral, and my mom served it at her wedding, or had it served at her wedding. And Hamlet says, I wish I had met my dearest foe in heaven, or ever I'd seen that day, Horatio. My father. Methinks I see my father. And Hamlet is seeing his father in his mind's eye. And Horatio is looking around because he's just seen the ghost earlier and says, where, my lord? And Hamlet says, in my mind's eye, Horatio. Horatio says, I saw him once. He was a goodly king. He was a man taken for all in all. I shall not look upon him, his likeness again. And then Horatio lets it out. My lord, I thought I saw him last night. Saw who? My lord, the king, your father. The king, my father? Season your admiration for a while, Horatio says, with an attentive ear, till I may deliver upon the witness of these gentlemen this marvel to you. For God's love, let me hear it. And so then these friends of his, fellow students, let him know, well, a fellow student and the soldiers, let him know that his father's ghost has come and looks like he wants to talk. Hamlet asks all these questions. How was he dressed? How did he look? Oh, so you didn't see his face if he was in all of his armor. Well, yes, he had his mask up so we could see it was your father. And Hamlet says in line 241, I will watch tonight, perchance it will walk again. 'Twill walk again. Maybe that ghost will come back out. And Horatio says, I bet it will. I warrant it will. Hamlet says, if it assumes my noble father's person, I will speak to it, even though hell itself should gape and bid me hold my peace. I pray you all, if you have hitherto concealed this sight, let it be tenable in your silence still. Please don't tell anybody else what you've seen. And I will meet you between 11 and 12 on the platform. And all of them say, of course, we will keep this secret. And they leave the stage, and once again, we have Hamlet by himself, and he says to the audience, my father's spirit in arms, meaning in his armor, with his sword in arms, all is not well. I doubt, meaning I suspect, some foul play. I wish the night were here already. Would the night were come. Till then sit still, my soul. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth overwhelm them, to men's eyes. All right, in the next segment, I will talk to you about Act 1, Scene 3. And keep in mind, once again, let me see if I can find my marker. Ah, here it is. About the stages of grief. We have denial, or shock. We have anger. We have bargaining, depression, and then finally, acceptance. Hamlet is not able to accept his father's death. it looks as though the king, the new king, his uncle and the queen, are in denial. Why be sad? Come on now. Which pisses him off. And then, if you had a chance to talk to your dead parent, would you take it? That's bargaining all the way. And he already started out in his first soliloquy talking about being suicidal. Hamlet is running the gamut of these stages of grief. The only one that he hasn't arrived at all is acceptance. And that's not going to come easy. Now, Shakespeare, that's one of Shakespeare's greatest talents, is seeing inside human beings' minds, the psychology of being human. These stages of grief, this idea didn't come out until the 20th century. We see it in Western culture dating back to the Renaissance. We see it even earlier, dating back to classical times. But formulating it this way took until the 20th century. And yet Shakespeare completely understood that. Why? He himself had watched people grieve. Thank you.